I spent the past 4 years helping loads of different players improve their fighting in Fortnite, and one thing I've noticed, no matter what meta, what season, what chapter we're even in, is people still make these same 10 common beginner fighting mistakes, no matter what their skill level is or how many earnings they've got. So what I've done is I've got loads of different examples for you guys of these 10 common mistakes, and I'm going to go through and show you exactly what these mistakes are, how to fix them, as well as how to prevent them. Please leave a like if you enjoyed, and let's get straight into this with the most common defensive fighting mistake that I'm sure you guys make. Alright, first things first, to start off this video, guys, I'm going to cover the most common mistake that I see people make in fights. And this is actually from Primo right here, who's a good player. They've got solo cash cup earnings, they know what they're doing in comp, and they're still making these very common mistakes that you guys need to be avoiding. And it's how to peek properly when you're defensive, and not just what peeks you're doing in terms of edits, but how you should be positioning your character in relation to those edits. So right here, first things first, left-hand window peek, big no-no, you guys should never do that. It's just going to lead you getting cracked if your opponent is tracking you properly. Then the next peek that they do is probably the biggest mistake that people make in the whole time, is instead of playing the range when they're lower HP, so you can see right here he's got a HP disadvantage compared to his opponent, instead of playing range, so using that pump range versus the gatekeeper of the opponent and doing a chip shot from distance, instead take a look at the edit selection they do. They try to rush into the edit and open a 50-50 edit to catch somebody off guard. You should never do a 50-50 edit when you have that HP disadvantage. And of course the opponent sees this, they read it, they very quickly place a wall, edit that wall, the right hand peak, and then get that shot off in return. And the main reason those types of peaks don't work is because if you miss that one opportunity to get a shot off, you're caught completely in the open, you're on that left hand peak, you're overexposed, and you're always going to get hit in return. Then to follow up, they do a very nice peak right here. They do a quick timing peak. They know the opponent is going to chase them to their box. Very good stuff by them. Even though they're quite exposed, they do a good quick peak to get a shot off and reset the wall. And then to end the fight, take a look what they do. This is so common. They do the correct edit selection. So not editing this front wall where the opponent is pressuring, and instead editing the side wall. But however, they mess up their movement. It's not just about the edit selection that you guys are doing. It's about whether you're strafing the correct way, about whether you're jumping the correct way, to make sure you're not going to be exposed when you do that edit, especially when you're low HP. As you can see, they go ahead, open the edit without thinking, without reading where the opponent is, without realizing, oh, can the opponent see me as I do this edit? And of course, the opponent can just pull out their shotgun and hit that shot. My dog could hit that shot if I whacked her on a keyboard or mouse, and that is what you guys need to avoid, is doing those rushed open edits when somebody has a full angle on you. Always read where your opponent is and make sure your movement is correct, so you're not going to be peeking on a left-hand peek or even just being exposed when you open the edit. One of the most common fighting mistakes I see people making is in a situation just like this. They've got the opponent full box, they have a massive advantage on the opponent. However, they play the end of the fight wrong, and they also play what they do after they win the fight completely wrong as well. So they get that 100 tag right there, they've got the piece control. What should you guys do in this situation? What should be your primary objective in this goal? And it's not to end the fight as quick as possible, contrary to what a lot of people believe. The key issue with that, if you try to end the fight as quick as possible, like Young Thug does here, is he ends up running in on, not the best peak, he doesn't know where his opponent is, and at least the opponent hitting a shot back on you in return. And of course, he's ended the fight nice and quick, but he's wasted all the heals that he potentially gained from that height by getting hit, as well as he's left himself vulnerable to third party. Whenever you guys end a fight, always get the muscle memory built up to make space in brick or metal, because you're going to get mats from the kill anyway, especially if you're later in the game like this. You can see he gets loads of mats, he gets cat mats, but he doesn't focus on making space. Instead, he gets greedy, gets focused on the loot, and that leads to a third party that knows his low HP, running over, grabbing his floor, and he wastes an entire game. Guys, being good at fighting isn't just about winning your fights as quick as possible. It's about doing good edit selections, knowing the basics of how not to trade damage, and making sure that you always leave yourself in the best position possible after a fight. One of the biggest and most common mistakes that I see people making in defensive situations, and leads to them dying pretty much 9 times out of 10, is whenever they're in a single box, they do not create more space. In this situation, when there's somebody directly on the wall, your first reaction should not be just trying to shoot back. It should be making space and then assessing what your opponent is doing. The issue is, as soon as you let them smack your wall once, they already have a massive advantage, because no longer can you now edit safely and get a shot off and get a counter pump, since they can just instantly take the wall back, and then you're going to die because you've got no space to work with. As you can see, the opponent takes the wall, and then you're basically just fully stuck in that one box, getting pressured, and you're always going to go down in that situation. What you should do instead is, whenever somebody starts fighting you or you get hit to low HP, it's just follow this exact same principle right here, which is building 3 interconnected boxes in an L shape just like this. This means that no matter which wall somebody gets on, you've always got another box that you can move into to back up safely. It allows you to get your heals off, as well as allows you to safely go for counter damage rather than just relying on holding a single wall. If you guys just rely on holding walls whenever somebody's pressuring you or fighting you, you're going to be going down every single day of the week, and you won't be able to get good counter shots off and trade damage with your opponents like Caspian did right there. Alright, our fourth most common mistake that I see people making the whole time in fights is just having bad awareness, and this normally comes from being tunnel visioned. I'm sure you guys have experienced this in a tournament where you get awareness checked from nowhere because you're tunnel visioned on trying to get shots off on a player, or you're focusing on just one player. Always remember, whenever you go for a shot on somebody, even if you hit it or not, or if you just make noise on the map, like use a nitro barrel for example, other players in the area are going to know this. You need to make sure whenever you're rotating, whenever you're leaving a box or leaving a bush for example, you're always doing 360s and you're not tunnel visioning, trying to go for shots on people multiple times. This player right there, they get immediately awareness checked after going for that shot and missing it, and that leads to them wasting this entire game and not qualifying for the cash cup. This is one of the easiest ways that you guys can improve at fighting, is whenever you're in a situation where you're low HP and you need to get heals off, or basically whenever you have a little bit of downtime during a fight, what should you be doing? And the key thing to always remember is to track your opponent. Use visual audio where the footsteps are located, use the actual audio coming into your headphones so you can figure out what layer they're on, as well as use your screen information. Look where your opponent is. Don't ever get caught in a situation like this where you're not tracking where your opponent is. You're not looking, what are they holding a pickaxe out? Are they holding out nitro splashes to run in? Are they holding an SMG out to spray straight in? Track what the opponent is doing so you don't ever get caught out by this opponent's play, which is running in your box with SMG and you die while reloading. It's such an easy way to go down, but I see so many players doing it because they're not tracking their opponents properly. If you guys are enjoying this video and you want to learn more about fighting from myself, as well as one of the most underrated coaches out there at the moment, Zycoma, then go check out Solo Superstars. We're both hosting some fighting coaching this week where we're going to be taking one player and going through a bunch of common fighting mistakes and fixing everything they need to in the upcoming session. So go check it out now if you're interested in improving your fighting during this sort of off-season period we've got. Now this next one is really simple, but one of the easiest ways you guys can get better at fighting is just no longer boxing in wood. I still see players doing this the entire time. You guys should only ever use wood when you're doing mid-rotates or when you're actually building up towards a fight or something like that. Because this other player here sees Misa, our example player, built boxing wood, it's such an easy W key. He can break the wall in, 2 bursts for an SMG, 2 pickaxe swings, and that's the reason why he chooses the key right here. If you're putting yourself in wood, you just make it such an easy target for other players, and they're just going to jump straight in with an extreme level of confidence. Fighting all the time just comes down to confidence in winning angels, and if you're boxing wood, you're basically giving your opponents more confidence than they should have because they think you're a worse player. Always avoid it. Now this next one is extremely important and it's slightly different compared to all of our previous fighting mistakes, and it is knowing when to disengage from a fight. And as a general rule of thumb guys, if your fight is taking more than 20 to 25 seconds to end, so when you start W-king someone to when you can actually kill them, or if you're on the defensive and the opponent is just playing like this, sometimes it is completely okay to disengage, and you do not need to win every single fight that you get into, especially when you and your opponent are quite equally matched in skill. What you'll end up finding happening is that one of you just burn through all of your heals and mats and you'll just grief each other completely, and it won't even be worth getting that kill at the end because you'll be so shambles afterwards. Instead of doing things like this, which is attract third parties, knowing that it's okay to disengage from fights is really, really worthwhile. It means that you can refarm your mats, you can look for a kill on somebody else elsewhere, as well as it's going to mean that you don't completely grief yourself just fighting in the middle of zone when everybody else is looking at you, which is exactly what happens here. As you can see, by the time this fight gets done, both of these guys are completely shambles, and it comes down to whoever can actually just win this final angel actually ends up winning. Now this next common fighting mistake is one I see people doing the entire time, and it's first of all just not knowing where is a good place to take a fight. And as a general rule of thumb, you never want to be fighting on the congested side of zone or in a spot where a lot of players are going to be rotating into. And this spot they're fighting in here, where they're trying to third party this other team, 2 players fighting, already is on congested side of zone, right? So you can see this edge zone is pulling all these other players on the north hand side into this spot. It's going to become very busy. There's a lot of nitro rings that lead into this area, as well as this is a good area where people tend to refarm and get cactus and things like that. So it's just automatically very busy, and they're choosing to third party a fight where there's already 2 players involved, which isn't necessarily the best play in this case. Then the second mistake I see a lot of people making in these type of situations, or just in general, is not knowing how to close out a fight and having bad movement when doing so. So already you can see this guy's movement is really stiff. He doesn't really know how to actually stop this player from getting up onto height. He just sort of lets the guy go up on height. And then when it comes to closing out the fight, take a look what they do. They get the wall, they get the centerpiece, and they just walk into the box, guys. You should never ever be walking into a box to close a fight if you can go ahead and just do a smart right and peek from distance and reduce your exposure in that fight. Especially this edit selection they're doing where they're just walking straight in both times is really poor. And of course, because they're fighting on congested side, somebody else who's third party exactly like they just did comes in and sneaks in. Always think, guys, before you get into a fight, if you're already third partying a fight, what are the chances there's going to be more players in the immediate area who are going to third party you? And this Josh guy who actually made earnings in the solo cash cup, in this particular solo cash cup, they do a really smart choice in their WQ game, is getting away from the congested north side where there's loads of players going to third party them, and they instead go down towards dead side, down towards the south to get into more free fights where there's less chance of third party, so they can still get some kills without that massive risk of somebody just running in your box after you finish the fight. This next mistake is extremely common amongst controller players, and so there's a lot of like high progressive mouse and keyboard players who have this playstyle, and it's basically being so reliant on trading damage to end fights and not knowing how to just use piece control and how to actually just using good movement and good techniques to end fights without trading loads of damage. So as you can see, this player gets the crack right there, and take a look what they decide to do. So as they get towards the wall, there is so many ways they could end this fight in an intelligent way. Without taking the fight at the same amount of time, they could, slide a cone in since there's nothing in. They could slide a cone in from underneath. They could break the wall and get a stair in at the same time. There's a lot of things they could do to not take damage to close this fight, but instead they run straight in, trade a shot right there, and then trade another shot. They're not even focused on blocking angles. They're just focused on ending the fight as quick as possible. And it works out in the majority of cases, especially lower elo. But the issue is, as you get versus like later in the game or higher up in elo, this playstyle no longer works and you're going to get punished, and all it takes is one player who holds out their gun and trades with you, and that's going to how you throw an entire game. So you can see small HP advantage again, not a crack, not like 150 damage, and look what they decide to do. They decide to go fully piece control, trying to jump into the box, not scouting where their opponent is, not looking, and this is how you just run into somebody who's going to two-tack you and you throw an entire game away. If you guys have this playstyle, I'd really focus on slowing down a lot and making sure you're always reading where your opponent is and never committing into a box unless you have at least 150 HP advantage, which at that point in time, I would say it's completely fine to hop in a box. Highly unlikely you lose that fight. Now, this last play is something that I think is so important. It's the reason I'm putting it at the end of the video, guys, so you can remember it and apply it in your games, is whenever you have a situation where you're on the defensive, right? There's somebody pushing you, you're the one in the box. What you should always do in this situation is slow down and don't try to do anything proactive, right? Don't try to instantly counter peek, instantly go for a play, and it's instead play more reactively. So wait for your opponent to make a mistake. Wait for them to get caught with their pickaxe out or when they're in a bad spot when they're pressuring you. Especially in this situation right here, Camas is cat mats, he has everything he needs. He doesn't actually need to fight this opponent. All he needs to do is just wait for this opponent to disengage. But instead, look what he does. He instantly sprints out the box, looks at some crazy counter peek. Right here, he instantly edits when the opponent's on his wall. This guy probably should have taken the wall and getting some damage on him in this situation. Then he instantly sprints out, and he does get rewarded for it. He gets a little 70 tag right there. All he is doing is giving the opponent height. Now he's forced into a scuff spot, trying to pressure the opponent from below. The opponent gets a nice pump on him right there, and suddenly he's forced into making a load of space. And this is when he actually slows down and starts doing some good box fighting fundamentals right here. Look, he makes a 2x1, very nice. He plays back from the space that he's got. He's waiting for a mistake from the opponent, so the opponent to jump in right there. As you can see, plays this nice little angle for a bow. And as soon as you start doing the basics and playing slower and playing reactive, people treat you with more respect because you're not just an easy kill. You're not just running out your box. You're not giving yourself up on bad angles. And a lot of the times what used to happen, exactly like that, is the opponent disengages and they leave you alone, especially in better lobbies. It's not always going to work. People aren't always going to disengage. But if you play a little bit slower, you make sure you're playing reactively, you're going to notice you're taking a lot less damage in return, using a lot less heals during fights, and you're a lot more stacked when you get done with the fight. As you can see from that one fight, he ended up losing half of his mats. He lost a cola, and that's actually the reason he goes down later on, is because he's completely out of heals because of his actual playstyle and fighting. So even though he was winning his fights earlier in the game, he was ending up way too shambles, and that's the reason he went down. And I'm sure you guys have probably had this happen in fights in game, right? You're winning fights, but you're not winning them in the correct way, and that leads to you being shambles later on, or at least you getting third parties, and that is how you go down. All right, that's all for this video, guys. If you want to go check out how to qualify for every single solo cash cup, even if you suck at fighting and you don't want to fight a single player, go click on the video on the left. And if you want to learn inside the mind of a player who's a semi-pro with around 1k earnings, then go check out the video on the right. It's really valuable, and there's a lot of things you'll learn if you're at that level.